Ladies and gentlemen, telling a story matters so much. And one of the best storytellers I know, one of the most captivating individuals I know, and one of the most beardly men I know, that's a triple threat if you're counting, is my buddy Steve Creer, a friend since college. And now he is doing incredible things to bring greatness and great storytelling and energy to the microphone, to the written word, and to everything else. So my guess is if you're watching this, your desire is to become a better storyteller. We're going to take you on a journey here. We will be done in less than an hour, so no need to run. Those of you watching live, we will send the recording of this also. Those of you watching on the YouTubes, feel free to put questions you have down there in the comment section, and we will happily respond to all of that. But my name's Eric Hatch. I'm in real estate and I'm in business coaching, and it's my pleasure to bring a webinar to you from Hatch Coaching every week. And this week is no exception. My man, Steve Creer, is joining us. Steve, I see you every week, but now seeing you in what appears to be a jail cell is a really, really nice marriage of all this.
Yeah, it's really classy, isn't it? So in 2020, we bought an old movie theater, and we're in the process of renovating the movie theater. And so I'm coming to you live from what used to be Screen 6. And so this is it's classy. So we're halfway done kind of thing. So wall coverings aren't up yet, so I look like I'm in jail.
And so you bought an old movie theater. People don't know your background necessarily. I'm hoping you can give us a little insight into who you are and why we're talking now.
Yeah. So, went to college with Eric, and then after college, got into ministry. And so in 2011, we started a church. And so we're in Moorhead, Minnesota, and we were meeting portable. Over the course of over 10 years, we continued to grow. We're over 400, close to 500 people now on a Sunday morning. And so it's just been a really fun journey. But then also we bought an old movie theater over COVID because we needed a place to meet. And so we're in the process of renovating an old, what used to be Second Run movie theater in town. So.
Yeah, this isn't the normal movie theater. This is where movies went to die.
Oh, this was super classy. You know, like this is the greatest spot. This is where they were still showing like Shrek 4 as it came out. It was a really great space.
Steve, so you as a pastor, you get a microphone in your hand all the time. You're working in small groups, you're working in solo groups, and you've learned to be a storyteller throughout all of this. Walk us through who you are, because your background has a lot of impact into how you serve today. And truth be told is, and I want people to understand this, it doesn't matter your calling. If you're called to be in real estate or in the ministry or office work, whatever it may be, we all have to become more captivating and more captivated in one another. And so Steve has some great guidelines. So I'm going to shut up and listen for the most part, Steve.
Yeah. So, I mean, I grew up in a family of storytellers. So my grandpa was a great storyteller. My dad is a phenomenal storyteller. He was also in law enforcement. So he was the sheriff of a county for 12 years. And so his stories are amazing. And you would just sit around, and I just remember being captivated about stories and how that all works. And then when I started getting into professional life, you know, as we look through these things, like the best way that I can describe things was through story. That was the best way that I could communicate. And so really just leaned in hard to what was hardwired into me, what was also just upbringing, the environment I grew up in, because you had to be a good storyteller to be heard in my family. So we're also loud in Italian. So it was like very demonstrative, loud stories, people talking over one another. And so you had to be quick, you had to be witty, and you also had to be able to tell a good story. And then when I got to college, same thing, just around just tremendous colleague, you know, our peers, classmates, all those kinds of things, roommates, and just around a really great group of guys and who could tell great stories. And I look back and I look at now where all these guys are, including you, Eric, and I just think about, wow, where we all have come because of being able to tell good stories and communicate our ideas and where we want to go and where we're headed, and using story to do so.
What's your favorite story to tell of me? Because we have a number of each other.
Oh, Eric.
Did you guys catch it? Eric. That's
Eric.
That's the language that a mother says to their child right before they tell them all the wrong that they've done.
Yeah. Man, we have a lot of really, really good stories. I'm trying to think of I think one of my favorite stories is when we went to Walmart at midnight and bought laser tag stuff,
Mm,
and then had a laser tag fight until like 3 a.m, running around a massive fraternity house.
yeah.
I think we spent like $75 in batteries, just for the which is a lot of money when you're broke and poor and college student, and you're like, let's put it into batteries to play laser tag. So
Mhm.
it's one of my favorites.
I think one of my favorites is when we decided to camp out because Dustin Diamond was coming to our college, to NDSU. And so it was February, and I went to the bar. Steve wasn't a bar guy. I was a bar guy. But I went to the bar until 1 a.m. And then a couple of us camped outside the Memorial Union on campus until the doors opened up at 6, because we wanted to be first in line to go see Screech do stand-up comedy.
Yes.
And we made shirts. We rallied people together. We skipped class all day. We made posters and signs. The doors opened at 6:30, and I think the first person got in line at about 6 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So it was, and then he was terrible on top of it.
Absolutely
It
horrible.
was the worst comedy show I've ever seen.
It was
So,
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except
wonderful.
for the show that people are watching now between you and me. Yeah, that may be worse. Uh, so many stories, and our ability to capture them and tell them matters a lot. Steve, why do people need to be great storytellers? Walk us through that framework, because we're going to get to the nitty gritty and we're going to give people a blueprint, but let's talk about the why behind it first.
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of reasons why you want to tell a good story, right? I mean, some of those things, it's a great communication tool. You can either tell, like, sometimes we use stories to tell deeper truths, right? Like stories with morals, and stories with like fables, like The Tortoise and the Hare is a great story that tells about diligence and persistence, right? Like, these stories tell us deeper truths. Also, stories help us communicate to people and help them feel and help them think maybe different than what they have when they went into before the story was being told. So to persuade in terms of, I want you to feel this, I want you to know this, I want you to think this way. Another way that why we tell stories is to serve them. Comedians are in the service industry, right? They tell great stories because
Unless you're Dustin Diamond.
Unless you're Dustin Diamond, yes. And so it is this way that we serve people. They have a laugh, we have a shared experience together. It was a bad comedy, but it made for a great memory. And those stories can really help us go, how do we do this? And then also to promote other people, right? Like, we tell stories like, let me tell you about my friend Eric, let me tell you about my friend Jason, let me tell you about my friend and what they've accomplished and what they've done. And people get inspired by that, but it also raises the esteem of those around us when we can tell a good story. Not just like, hey, he's a great leader, but he's a great leader, let me tell you about the time when he led really, really well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or she's a great communicator, and let me share you about this time that she did this thing, right? To inspire people to action is another great way. That's why a lot of us, if you're in sales, if you're in other, like, we inspire people to action, right? I remember being at a car dealership shopping for a van, and we went to the first one, and we were in a test drive, my wife and I, and the guy told a lot of stories, but he was just talking about himself and how great he was. And he was like, I'm this many years of service, I sell this many cars, I'm also a mechanic, I'm amazing, I'm awesome. And it really wasn't super compelling. We walked away just going, okay, that was something. And then
Steve, I was on a podcast yesterday.
Mhm.
My buddy Greg has a podcast. He's a wholesaler, and so he sells houses, and he's kind of the intermediary and matches up people, and so takes full advantage of that. And so he had just read my book, The Perfect Real Estate Agent Blueprint, which is cleverly over my shoulder. Isn't that fun?
Nice.
And in this, Greg is telling me, and he has this sweet New York accent, so he's way cooler than you and me in the first place. And our Midwestern accents are really crushing for everybody else right now.
Yeah.
And so in this, Greg says to me, he's like, Eric, I remember, because we were at a mastermind 2 years ago. He's like, I remember sitting by the pool and we talked about leadership and hiring and what that means to build a business with people and for people. And he said, I got to tell you now, I have this business in which I've been able to hire this person, and now they have a life that they never had before. And I've been able to have this person join me, and now they have a life that they never had before. And I listened to him and I'm like, Greg, is it true that you're making more money now than you were 2 years ago? He's like, oh, I'm making like double. And I go,
Mm.
Greg, is it true that you're working less now than you were a couple of years ago? He's like, yeah, absolutely. He's like, I'm living my best life. And I said, but your entire story that you just shared with me was about the other person. He was how good does Greg look in that, right?
Yeah,
When
exactly.
Greg
Yeah.
speaks well of somebody else and he shines a light on somebody else, that gives a gift to that person, but that also bounces back and gives a gift back to him. And so the paralleling of us being on this conversation today, Steve, is not by happenstance. It's
Mhm.
because I'm leaning in now and I'm paying better attention to the stories that people are telling and the stories that I tell as well. My favorite is to shine a light on other people. And that's what Greg did. And that's what I got to do for him now too.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing, right? Like when you invest in the lives of other people and you can use stories to do it because you're like, hey, you know what? I've gone through this, or I know somebody who has done this, or it's a story with Greg, right? Like everybody listening goes, oh, can I be a Greg? Right?
Yeah.
That's an inspirational story to be like, oh, I can be like a Greg. I can go and help other people succeed, and I can give people opportunities to succeed and to fail and to help them through this process so that they can be further than where they are right now. I mean, like
Mhm.
that story just myself, I'm just thinking about like, oh yeah, how can I do better? How can I do better with the people that I serve and the staff that are under me? Like those are important stories to tell because it keeps what's really, really true and really important at the forefront. And I think stories do that very well.
Uh, Steve, people want to look good when they tell stories. Why is that a
Mhm.
bad idea?
Um, so that's a good question. It's not always bad to look good. It's it's really difficult when all you're doing is trying to make yourself look good, right? Like so what happens is we think that everybody's going to respect us more if they just knew how amazing we were. And the reality is often people respect us when we share our vulnerability, when we talk about the mistakes that we've made, when when we walk through that, we become relatable, and becoming relatable is a very powerful thing. But just trying to make myself like if I was just going to sit here and spew off all the amazing things that I am and did, then people just you might think it's a story worth telling, but it's not a story that many people want to listen to.
Yeah.
And so when we tell stories, it's like, do we tell stories worth telling? And then do we tell stories that people want to hear, like that they can put themselves in, insert yourself in this place? Because otherwise you're just creating this sphere around yourself that nobody really wants a part of.
So let's be crystal clear. Yes, you can tell stories about your successes.
Absolutely.
It is far better and far more attractive, however, to tell stories of your failures, your strugglings, your shortcomings. If you're going to preach of someone's success, preach of somebody else's success.
Mhm.
Your success is tied to that and you will look better because of it. But when it comes to getting the word out should be, I'm vulnerable, I'm broken, I don't have it all figured out. I think that's the most attractive thing that people can have. One of my buddies said this to me once. He said, Eric, when you talk about your successes, it breeds competition. But when you talk about your struggles and your failures, it breeds compassion and
Mm.
community.
Yeah, I
And a
mean,
great reflection on that is like an AA meeting, right? In AA, you don't hear people pounding their chest saying, this is how great I am. They instead come in and say, this is how broken I am. That's what
mhm.
the church should be too, Steve, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, that's 100% true. And we think about, even if you do talk about your successes, talk about the struggle that it took to get there, and talk about I mean, like one of the most compelling storytellers that I can think of in it right now is David Goggins. If you've ever
Mhm.
listened to him stuff, like, and he
His
talks
his
about,
new book just came out today.
oh, dude, he's incredible. He's an incredible storyteller, right? Because
Mhm.
yes, he does all these incredible things, but he also says about where he was and where he started and who can, like anybody can do this. And yeah, I mean, I had a conversation. I was preaching, so it's more of a monologue. I feel like it's a conversation sometimes. Just recently, we were talking about conflict resolution in my church, and we talked about the fact that there was a guy that wronged me, and instead of going to him and talking to him, I decided to just not talk to him anymore and cut him out of my life. It just didn't follow up. And 13 years later, we crossed paths again and we talked. And I said, hey, there's something that happened. He goes, yeah, I know. I said this and I did this and I was really wrong. And you know what? Like I robbed myself of a 13 years of
Hmm.
relationship that I could have had with him because I was unwilling to go have the conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like that is the kind of story that you go, oh man, what in my life is being robbed because I'm not going to make the move to say, hey, let's work on this, let's work through this. And I was robbed of 13 years of a friendship. And so
Yeah.
like that's a story I tell, right? And that's something that people can relate to, people can hear, and people go, oh, that's a sobering reality when you think about it.
So, Steve, how do you make sure that if you have a story worth telling, other people are actually interested in hearing it?
Yeah, I think that's great. So one of the books that was really formative to me in helping me tell good stories is Story Brand by Donald Miller. Many people I think may have read it. If you haven't, you should. What's great about that is what Donald talks about is you are not the hero of the story. And that's what we were just talking about, right? Like making other people, like you are the guide to help people. You are the guide to help people along the way. Every good movie has the trainer, right? They're you know, the Mickey to Rocky, the Obi-Wan to Luke, you know, like, you know, Hatch is huge into Star Wars. Eric is big into Star Wars. Right. But everything along the way, the Mr. Miyagi to Daniel.
Yes,
right.
Thank you. Now you got me there.
Yeah, exactly. So you have these people along the way, right? And they're helping the protagonist, the hero of the story, make a choice and come to a desirable future instead of a painful death or, you know, a tragedy, right? In storytelling, you are the guide. You're not the hero. And so when you tell about your product, about your, you know, selling real estate, those kinds of things, like you position yourself in a way that says, you know, like you could say, hey, I sold 100 houses this last year, right? Or you could say 100 people through this agency have found homes, like the place where they're going to have Christmas this year, the place where they're going to live, the place where they're going to celebrate, they're going to cry, they're going to have yards, they're going to raise families, right? Like those kinds of things. Like we provide homes for people instead of I sold a bunch of houses. That's a different way of telling that story. And it's way more compelling when you're the guide to helping that person get to where they want to be.
So you're saying, at least in real estate language, that the hero, the protagonist in the story are the homeowners. It's not
absolutely
us as the realtors.
No, it is the person buying the house, right? Because what school district, what neighborhood, what town, what, you know, and you start talking about like, hey, you know what? I noticed in your family, like when we bought the van, going back to that, the guy that we bought the van from said, what are you going to use that van for? And we're like, well, we have 2 kids and we like to travel and do this. And he goes, I got just the van for you. He goes, this van was owned by an older couple who loved to take road trips. And when they sold us the van, when they traded it in, they said, we really hope this goes to a family. And you're like, oh man, like this is our van. Like this was the thing that we were looking for, right? This was the thing that he put us in that spot of like, think of the road trips that your family's going to take and the memories that are going to be built in this vehicle that was once used for the exact same thing that you want to use it for. You can do that with homes too, right? Like this was, you know, the previous owners or whatever, or, you know, like you go, this is a developing area. And as you guys, as a young couple or as a young professional, this is a place where you can really start your journey. And I think it's a really amazing place in which you can do that. So the homeowner, the buyer, the person that you're walking with, they're the hero. You are the guide to help them get to their preferred future.
I like that. Keep going, Steve. I want to hear you talk more about the how to be a great storyteller. I think you gave me a couple of notes. You talk about head, heart, and hands. I want to understand that.
Yeah. So this is what I do when I preach, and this is other things when we do stories as well. Is your head, your heart, and your hands. What do I want you to think? What do I want you to feel? And what do I want you to do? So head, heart,
so
hands.
Good. That's so good.
That's how it's like. So in my world, right? Like there's we open the Bible, we talk about wisdom and we talk about the life of Jesus and we talk about these kinds of things, right? And so you go, okay, what do you need to know? What do you need to know about this context? What do you need to know about this now in this moment? What do you need to feel, right? So like one of my favorite examples in the Bible is Jesus and his disciples, right? And so he's getting towards the end of his life, and 2 of his disciples decide that they want to have a place of honor in Jesus's world. And so what they do is they coax their mom into talking to Jesus about promoting them as proponing her son. So like, hey, would you go talk to Jesus for us? And yet, can you imagine, like, that's what you need to know, but what do you need to feel in that moment, right? Like if you're the other guys like sitting around going, wait, you had your mom go talk to Jesus? Like that's your strategy to get promoted, as you talk to your mom to talk to your boss. Well, that's a real swift move. And rightfully, everybody else was just like indignant and beside themselves. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It just shows the humanity of the people, at the same time going, what do you need to feel in this? And then also like, what do you need to do in response to that? Are you so busy about promoting yourself, or are you busy about doing the work that you've been called to? And so just like in that little story of Jesus and his disciples, right? Like that's where, like, what do you need to know? Like, what do you need to know about this? What do I want you to feel in this moment? And then what do we do with this? And so that's when I tell a story, when I get up on Sunday mornings, it's all about, engaging the head, engaging the heart, and then engaging the hands.
Are you an even, because you're an evangelical pastor, so that means that you're preaching much longer than a Lutheran pastor, as an example. But are you a third in head, heart, hands when you're telling a story?
It depends on the text, and depends on where I'm at. Really, honestly, there's a lot of, and it really depends on your story too, right? Like there's people who need to know a lot more than what they need to feel in that moment, or they need to or there comes a place, right? Like in selling homes, like head, what's your limit, what's your spending, what's your budget, right? And then you get into these houses and go, can you see yourself here, right? Can you, maybe this here, maybe that there. And then there comes a time when you really have to focus on the hands. Like you need to get your paperwork in, you need to get this done, we need to schedule this, right? And so it's sometimes it's a third, but ultimately we're gonna address all three depending on the nature of the day.
I've always said that logic makes people think, that's the head part, but emotion, the heart part, makes people act. And my guess is that's when you see in your storytelling, you see somebody go from like, you're speaking sense to now you're priming the pump to get them to actually take action. I'm curious, Steve, when you are preaching or when you're posting something on social media, you're pretty quiet on social media. You and your wife even share an account. And so you're quiet about it. I have to say, is that Natalie's voice or Steve's voice?
If there's emojis, it's Natalie. So that's,
and if they have a beard, it's Steve.
We curate, we determine what stories we're going to tell, and it's either going to be inspiring or funny. Like that's the stories I tell on social media. Like, is it going to make you laugh, or is it going to make you think? When
you're planning to deliver a message, and let's talk a sermon, a 30 or 40-minute sermon, and you're trying to figure the layers that you have into that, you do a really great job of telling personal stories, and then stories from the Bible, and then stories from people that you bounce around. What's your strategy and your thought process behind the how and the why with that?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's my audience. And so if I were just going to tell my stories of when I played high school football, or that I'm married, or that I like to mountain bike, like I could tell those stories and I can just live in that groove, and I would alienate most of my audience. Right. And so like, it is a discipline to think through and to go, who else is hearing this? What kind of, like, who's beyond like my market or the people that I know? To vary your examples, to vary your stories when you do this, I think is so important. And it is a discipline to be like, okay, I can't just tell stories about being married with kids, because not everybody's married with kids. I have to think about the single lady who's going to work every day, who just got out of college, right? I gotta think about that. And it comes from like knowing people, right? To get to know who you're talking to, and then to be able to go, what stories can I share that's going to grab them, that's going to help them understand what it is that we're trying to get at here. So I think it's a discipline to think through what examples you're going to use and vary them consistently.
Steve, we saw in the Bible, Jesus uses parables all the time, common things that help us to understand, and we feel a little more approximate to it, to explain something that's greater and grander. Those kind of examples. The greatest storyteller was first Jesus. He put it into simplicity. How do you keep your things simple? I mean, I know you're not that smart, so that helps a lot, but
That is super
yeah,
helpful.
yeah,
I
yeah.
talk goodly sometimes. And so yeah, I think being simple, but also like the stories that Jesus told were the ones that had the broadest appeal, right? He talked to fishers about fishing. He talked to farmers about farming. Like he found ways to tell these stories that were common to everybody. And I think honestly, like great storytellers, like I know it's an older sitcom, but Everybody Loves Raymond is brilliant storytelling because everybody can relate to it, right? Like, oh, you have crazy family members. Oh, I have crazy family members, right? The greatest stories that we have and the greatest, sitcoms and movies are things that people can really, really grab onto and go, oh yeah, that's hilarious because I know exactly how that feels. And so taking those things and shining fresh light on it, or even sharing your emotions around it or your feelings around it. A lot of times you'll find that people go, oh, I had that same feeling. Oh, I thought that was weird too. I thought I was the only one. And that's where getting vulnerable, because I might be the only one that thinks this, but this, right? And so, and then Jesus, yeah, he was just captivating, right? He told stories that people needed to hear, that talked about who God is and what he's like, and it really helped resonate deeply with people.
Mm-hmm. Steve, what's the main point? Is it the story, or is it the point the story is making?
It's always the point the story's making.
Okay. So how do you take somebody who's not a great storyteller or is trying to dip their toe into it, probably on social media or a podcast or into a group of people? How do you get them to, because you're coaching pastors and preachers all the time on how to do this.
Yeah.
How would you walk somebody through taking what is a great story and turning it into a great experience for the listener?
Yeah. What's the point of the story? Like, and so like, not only the communicating a deeper truth, but what are you inspiring to action? You want them to think? Why would you tell this story? Why does it necessary that you tell this story? And once you start figuring out, like, if you have a point in mind and it's frustrating you, like, how do I communicate this? Then you go, I need to tell a story about this. And so when Eric and I were in college, we would recruit people we had Rush Week, we were in a fraternity together, and we would tell stories of the house. Like we would tell stories about guys doing things and the fun things, so that we can help people picture what it's like to live there and what it's like to be a part of this group. And so when we tell stories, we go, why are we doing this? And then from there go, what do I need you to think? What do I want you to feel? What do I want you to do in response to this? And so as you think through those kinds of things, going, is this story going to make my point clear? And then in your story, make bold moves. Don't meander. Like, it's better to tell a simple story that's really profound than tell an elaborate story that you just lose people, right? Like we can get flowery, we can chase all these rabbit trails, and we can do all these things, but the reality is what are the bold moves that we need to make in our story so that we can keep people moving forward? Don't tell a simple story. If from there, you can kind of go off from there, but throw strikes. When selling a house or selling a product or whatever it may be, right? Or whatever it is that we're doing, inspiring people to action. Then it's like, then tell the story and make bold moves. We did this, and then this happened, and then this person did this, right? Your friend Greg, we had a conversation. He told me all about this. He's making this much money. He's doing this now. He's actually focusing on other people. That's a wonderful story with bold movements, so that people can follow you.
Steve, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Great.
We're halfway through, and what I want you to give us like a 10-minute, 7 to 10. If I tell a pastor 10 minutes, he's taking 20. So
Fair.
A 5 to 10 minute message. I want you to give us a story. I want you to go head, heart, hands. I want to see a real life example so we can unpack that. And I'm going to give you a moment to think of it. And I'm going to clue this listening audience in to just one thing that I believe is important. As you watch Steve go to his happy place and go, oh crap, he's calling me to the carpet now. I think one of my favorite pieces to do is to change the order of a story. When we usually tell a story, we're telling it in a linear fashion. I met Steve in 1999 in Fargo. We then became great friends. We then were in each other's weddings, where Steve had a gal pass out at her wedding, or at his wedding. And since now we do breakfast together every Friday, 20 years later. Like, that's a linear story. I think a way to change a story is to say, you want to know how I ended up having breakfast with the same guy 20 years after I met him? Well, it started like this, right? Change the order and the dynamic. I label it A, B, and C. You usually have your beginning, which frames it. You have your B, that's the climax or the height of the story, the drama of the story. And then the C is the result. And so if you're taking an ABC, a linear story, think about changing that and practicing that rhythm and adjust that. Because when it comes to telling stories, conciseness matters and preciseness matters. But more than anything, what you're going to see from Steve in just a moment is the energy that you bring is far more important than the content that you bring. We've used church as a background for this conversation because it's the same language that we have, Steve, in the worlds that we both worked in. And I've seen some really, really great preachers who have nothing to say. And I've seen some really great pastors who have no preaching ability. Those that can do both, those that can tell a great story and deliver great context with it, are the ones in which I love aligning with. So I killed a little bit of time. I hope you came up with something. I'm not going to set a timer for you, but folks, I want you to listen and lean in to the head, the heart, and the hands.
Yeah, so I think probably the best thing to talk about is being generous. Like, I think that's probably a good place to start, with being generous. And so in the scriptures, it tells us to be generous. Jesus tells us it's better to give than to receive. And to live a generous life means that we give above and beyond of ourselves. We think outside of ourselves in order to be generous. Being generous means you give out of the overflow. What's great about the Bible, actually, when it talks about generosity in 2 Corinthians, is that it says that we are to decide in our heart what we are to give, because God loves a cheerful giver, which means we don't give under compulsion, we don't give under guilt, which I think is the church is actually pretty good at, and in a really, really bad way, notorious for, is guilting people into doing things. And what the Bible says is actually it's better to give than to receive, and you'll reap blessing for it, but also you are to decide in your own heart what you are to give and how you are to go about that. Because he says we're not to give under compulsion, because God loves a cheerful giver. And so as we live generous lives, we think about giving cheerfully. What does it mean for me to give cheerfully? What can I decide beforehand that I'm going to go out and do this? And so one of the ways that we do this at my church is we do a thing called Give Back Sunday, where we take money from the church, we put it in envelopes, and we give it to everybody who attends on a Sunday morning and says, now go be generous. If you want to add to this, then go do that, but go bless somebody and be generous. And we've been doing this for 11 years now. We just did it on Sunday, and we sent it out, and we're looking forward to hearing the stories. And one of the things, the best story that I have is when my son was 10, he's 17 now. When my son was 10, he got one of the envelopes and he said, I want to give my money to a Walmart cashier. And I'm like, that's a great idea, bud. Let's go. So we're driving to Walmart. And as we're driving there, I realize, oh, wait, we can't just give a Walmart cashier money, have her pocket it, and have that be okay, right? Like, there's kind of rules against that. We could get somebody fired for doing that. So I told Seth, I said, hey, buddy, I don't know if we can, because they have policies about not taking money. And he goes, well, let's just go anyways. And I go, let's go. Let's go and let's see what happens. So we go, and we have generosity in our hearts. We're going to go. And we get there, and in the parking lot, there's a girl crying next to her car because she got into an accident, fender bender, broken headlight, right? So she's on the phone, she's talking, she's crying. She gets off the phone, and Seth goes, I want to give my money to her. And so we get out of the car, and I go, buddy, it's on you. And so he walked up, gave her the envelope that had money in it. It had about $100 in it, because we got money from the church and we added our own money. And so he goes, here, I want you to have this, and I want you to have a Merry Christmas. And she goes, thank you, little buddy. She's like, can I give you a hug? And he goes, sure. And as she leans down to hug, her coat opens up and she's wearing a Walmart cashier name tag.
Huh.
Like, are you kidding me? Like you go, that was just like, we just wanted to go do something good. We realized that we couldn't do the thing that we wanted to do, but we didn't stop moving forward. And you know what happened? That thing actually came right back around, and he was able to do what he set out in his heart to do. And I believe God ordained that moment. And we didn't give up on being generous. We didn't just say, oh, well, I guess we're not going to do it anymore. And so I would encourage everybody who's listening today to be generous, like to think through that and to go, how can I go out and be generous, and where can I start? And just start here, and let's move forward and see what happens for it. Because you know what? That's the best $100 I ever spent. I have that story for forever, and it's vivid in my mind as I think about it. So I would say be generous and see where that takes you.
Yeah. Perfect. And you didn't go 20 minutes.
I
This is
didn't go
the
20
first
minutes.
time.
Yeah. So I think I went 5 or 6.
So those of you listening, those of you watching right now, did you see immediately when Steve went from conversation to presentation or storytelling? He sat up in his chair, he leaned in a little more, his tone of voice and his energy changed. Steve, we've been asking questions for 30 minutes, and it has been a little bit like routinized. Like, I want to make sure I cover these points. And so it's well thought out. And when things are well thought out, it's not natural. It doesn't come across as the like, oh shoot, that's my 10 out of 10. We are 10s out of 10s when we do what we are naturally designed to do. And we are naturally designed to tell stories.
Yeah.
People
are story people.
Did you catch, you referenced the Bible, which brought in credibility outside of you. You told a story that was personal. You gave a challenge to people, and you did so in a concise manner. I think if people are listening here, and if we're doing the same thing, if we're going head, heart, hands, we need to first talk about why we tell stories and the importance of that. And I think, Steve, you did a great job of framing that. The heart of it, the goal of it, before we send people out with homework, what's the purpose of telling stories, Steve? Because I think I know the answer, but I'm curious what you're going to say.
Purpose of telling stories is to help people. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about helping people, helping them think differently, helping them move on something that they need to, challenge them to a better life. It's about helping people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I won't disagree with that it's about helping people.
Good.
No, I think that telling a story is about relationships, and it's about connection. Miles Montplaisir, who's the You Betcha guy, he's done a pretty incredible job. If you haven't followed him on social media, it's wild to see. He has over 1 billion views on his videos that he's done. And he's a guy that applied to be my marketing manager 5 years ago with Hatch Coaching. And so to see now what he's done, I'm just so proud of Miles. And he talks about the purpose of a story is that you want to see yourself in that story. You maybe want to be entertained. That's sometimes part of a story. You maybe want to align and say, that's me in that story, or that's my family member in that story. When you can create and build a relationship in that, your ability to highlight the things, not just to give the narrative, but to highlight. Because Steve, I think that if you were to have more curation time with that story, you would talk about the innocence of a 10-year-old. Right? If we gave you 10 minutes instead of 5, you talk about the innocence of a 10-year-old and what it meant in his eyes. Right. And so we're picturing our kids in that situation. We did a fundraiser for Unseen, a nonprofit I know you and I both care about a lot. And we did a fundraiser for Unseen a couple of months ago. And I had a group of about 200 realtors in the room. Some of you who are watching this right now were in the room. And I said, folks, I know we're having drinks and having fun, but we're here to raise money for Unseen. I just need you to go with me for 30 seconds. I said, I want you to close your eyes. And then I said, I want you to picture the kid in your life that's the most important to you. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's somebody else's, but I want you to picture that kid. And now I just want you to imagine that something happened to that kid. And we know that Unseen is fighting human trafficking. We're talking kids that are getting raped and molested and sold over and over again in these innocent bodies. And I didn't say any of that because I didn't need to. A story is meant to bring you to a place where you can see yourself in that. And then your personal journey, your personal experience will carry the rest of the way. I said so little, and Steve, I want your thoughts on this in just a moment. I said so little, but with that, we ended up raising $400,000 that night because God was present, because people were moved and they wanted to step up because they saw themselves in that story. Steve, I think one of the things that happens is that people fill up all the air and all the space they have with their words. Tell me how less can be more sometimes, because if someone's going to come, because we're going to try to get to the hands portion, we're going to try to get to, here's the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you need to do as we wrap here. Sometimes people will give very long, here's a 3-minute story that could be told in 30 seconds. How do you coach people on concise and powerful rather than long and drawn out?
That's a hard thing to coach out of people. I think we need to assume that people are smart and that they can draw their own conclusions out of it. To be able to sit there and go, and I think one of the ways that we can ask people to be concise in their storytelling is by asking questions, like the way that you just did right there, to be like, close your eyes, imagine, what would you do? What would you be willing to give to rescue someone who's like the person in your mind, right? Asking good questions and then letting that hang and letting people decide in that, right? And then that really inspires people to action. So I think the more that we tell stories, the more we realize that less is more, the more that we realize that people can really enjoy the space, and to realize that we're more effective in what we're trying to do when we give people room to be able to process what has just been heard.
I don't know if I ever shared this with you, Steve, but I was down at a National Youth Workers Convention. I think it was 2008 or 2009, and Shane Claiborne got up to speak. And if any of you are familiar with Shane Claiborne, he is he's this obscure guy who's wearing homemade pants and dreadlocks and just peculiar in his ways. He is as brilliant as the day is long. And he gets up there and he's given 20 minutes to give this motivational talk to 5,000 youth pastors from around the country. And he gets up and he first juggles fire, very peculiar. And after he juggles fire, he's like, I still have 18 minutes left. And I want to give you the most powerful message that you're ever going to hear. And he opens up his Bible and he reads the Sermon on the Mount, and then he walks off the stage. And that's it. And we were left going like, okay, hold up. Like, you had this chance, this opportunity, this stage, and instead you used it a chance to shine a light on somebody else. And you used it as a chance to tell an incredible story that didn't have to be your own. That was the definition for me of less is more. That if you want to be profound, be simple, but you do have to be consistent. Let's end with this, Steve. And then folks, if you're watching live, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A. We want to be able to answer those both on camera and off. But when it comes to wrapping, Steve, I want to know what your thoughts are. I want to know what your takeaways are. What do people need to be doing before we send them out with some homework?
In terms of just thinking through storytelling? Yeah. I think what you said is brilliant, in terms of relationship, helping people see themselves in your stories are what are super compelling, and where they can see themselves in your world. So sitting in that car that you're trying to sell, or that product that you're trying to sell, whatever it is or whatever it may be, to be like, let me take you on a journey, and I want you to be a part of this by seeing yourself in the middle of it. I think is a brilliant strategy, and something that I think all of us could use improvements on. And I think that helps us make us better storytellers and then better human beings.
I want to challenge people. This is my first homework assignment for you. Is I want you to seriously work on getting better as a storyteller. And so if you write something out, let's say it ends up being 4 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs, make sure it first follows the rhythm of head, heart, hands, that all 3 of those elements are included in there. Steve, that's such a great takeaway that I have from this. The second thing I want you to do is, after you do it, I want you to try to trim it by 20 or 30%, and then try to trim it by 20 or 30% again. And what you're going to find is you can still tell the same story by getting rid of some of the riffraff that's there. One of my favorite stories that I've ever had is when I was 22 years old. I was training for and ran a marathon, but I ended up at Walgreens in the mall because I needed to find a really powerful antiperspirant because I was just sweaty all the time. Steve, you remember I was wearing all these shirts from Express for Men, which is formerly Structure. I was dressed up. I was metrosexual before metrosexual was a thing. Like in Fargo, North Dakota, at an agriculture institution. It was great.
Indeed.
I was gym tan laundry all day long. and so as I'm searching for this antiperspirant, I can remember vividly the manager shouting from down the hall, like, stop, somebody stop him. And so I see this guy barreling down the hall at me. And I'm like, wow, my first instinct is like, press yourself against the feminine hygiene products and the deodorant and protect yourself. Right. And as he draws closer, I'm like, Eric, you can save them all. And he comes at me and I duck down into turtle shell position, and he at full speed hits me and does a 270-degree turn and lands flat on his back. I get up, put a knee in his chest, and I go, don't move. Right?
Yes.
Fast forward, I leave and I'm exiting out left. He runs out away from the mall security guards who had no ability with their flashlights and their walkie-talkies to take him down. I end up tackling him again in the parking lot, chasing him down wearing leather Doc Marten sandals, like 15 pounds of sandal on each foot. I take him down and like, gang, I can tell this story for a half hour. I can get so animated with it if I have the time and the space and the capacity, but I have to read my audience. And I can deliver the same funniest punchlines that are in there and get the same feel like, wow, this is a crazy story. And I can take that one story. I got to tell you this, you can take one story and pull 10 different lessons from it. Mm-hmm. I usually lead, and Steve, I'm curious what you do. I usually lead with like, well, I know the lesson I'm trying to get to. And so what stories support that? I actually keep a book of like my great stories because I forget, right? I forgot about laser tag and then you brought it up. Mm-hmm. And so what I do is I try to say, well, am I going to try to take the story and marry it to the lesson, or I'm going to take the lesson and marry it to the story? How do you do that?
I usually go with the lesson, marry it to the story, just because of the nature of my work. Mm-hmm. And so then I draw from examples from history, examples from other people, that kind of thing. But you do hide, like you said, change the order. You do hide a little bit of that punch until when it's time to reveal different parts of this story, like head, heart, hands, with my son and the Walmart name tag, right? Like that was like the thing right at the end, which is, 100% true story, but to be able to hide that till the end is what is really impactful in that. So yeah, I think I do keep stories. I keep them written down. I also have a pretty good memory, so I'm able to draw upon that. So.
All right, gang. Steve, I'm going to give you final thoughts in just a moment. Here is what I want you to do, and this is homework for you. So I hope you're taking notes and are going to write this down. The first is write out a story and make sure it includes head, heart, hands. I shared that with you, and then shrink it down by 25% or so, then shrink it down by 25% again. And you'll see that your words don't need to be as drawn out, and you can get really concise with it. Of course, if you're speaking, you're going to lean in and find out, when do you get a reaction from the crowd? In my Saving the Mall story of when I took down the perp at Walgreens, I rip on mall security guards for like 5 minutes in it. Mm-hmm. And so I can just spin off, because if it gets a laugh, I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep diving in. So you build that energy more and more and more. But the only way you're going to get better at this is to actually practice. And so in written word and spoken word, take it and shrink it down. Get to the most concise, deliverable package. That's the first part. The second part is then to practice this, to practice your writing, to practice your speaking, and to role play this out with people and let them give you feedback of, this is unnecessary. This didn't instill any emotion in me. Because Steve, I could tell when you told the story of Seth and the Walmart worker, you knew every single word that you said mattered. But the only reason is because you're practiced, you've told that story before, and you're not just blindly going after it. And so folks, if you want to be effective in your communication as a great storyteller, this, like anything else, is going to require practice. So Steve, final thoughts for you.
Final thoughts. I think you have more stories than you realize. And I think that's a really important thing. Like, think back through your time and go, when did I feel inspired? When did I laugh? When did I cry? When did what were the times of my life that were impactful to me? Every one of those is a story. And so if you're like, I don't have any stories, my son and I talked about this one time. He's like, I don't have any stories. I'm like, really? When was the last time you laughed so hard you cried? Oh, it was this and this and this. And it's like, okay. And when was the last time you thought deeply? You have so many stories, and like Eric was saying about being able to pull life lessons out of those things. You can pull 10 of them out of there. And for the record, I was Eric's roommate when that happened. And when he came home, we're like, how was your run? He's like, my ribs really hurt. And I'm like, why does your ribs hurt? He's like, you wouldn't believe it. And then he told the story, and we're like, you're right. It's incredible.
Yeah.
So, but it started out with my ribs really hurt.
Yeah.
Right. It was hiding the
See,
story.
I don't even. Part of the story is I bruised my ribs. I lost a month of marathon training right before my race.
Yes, you did.
But
so you saved them all.
I did.
But
I did. You're welcome, West Acres in Fargo, North Dakota.
That's right.
I think it's so important that people get great at telling stories. I think it's so important that you practice telling stories. The people who are the best storytellers will be the ones that draw the most attention. Mm-hmm. Your content, I hate to say it, but I think that your content is secondary to your delivery. I think that the words you say matter a lot, but if you want a captive audience, your content is going to be that capture, that thing that captures people. You said, like you maybe disagree with me, Steve.
No, I think it's just profound when you think about it.
Ooh.
I know people who have tremendous content that don't know how to deliver it. Mm-hmm. And other people that have a lot of delivery, but not much to say. And to marry those both, but to say how you tell something is going to help people remember it, stick with it, and hopefully move them to action. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a profound truth.
Well, my action for today is hopefully clear, and I hope yours is also. Folks, Steve, do you have like online sermons and stuff? Because people may be leaning in and saying, hey, they want to learn a little bit more about this.
Yeah, Ignite Church in Moorhead, Minnesota. So ignitechurchfm.com. And then under the resources, there's sermons there. So all my sermons are online. So if you want to study the art of communication and storytelling, I would suggest read widely, look widely, and if I'm a resource that I could be helpful, I'd be happy to.
I love it. Folks, I'm going to leave you with this. If you want something for free, this book right here, The Perfect Real Estate Agent Blueprint, this is the thing we're doing to give it away. If you want a free copy of this book, all you need to do is respond to us with your email address. I prefer if you found me on Instagram. I'm at Real Eric Hatch, ERIK, Real Eric Hatch. Find me on Instagram. Give me your email address, and then we'll send you instructions on how to get a free copy of the book. All you have to do is pay shipping and handling, because we want to help people to grow their businesses, whether it be through storytelling or building anything else. Hatch Coaching is committed to bringing you webinars this and every week. So next Tuesday, we'll have another one coming your way. Be sure to sign up for that. But in the meantime, we'll catch you on the flippity flip. On behalf of Steve Creer, my name's Eric Hatch. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time, everybody. Much love.